Helping Seniors Television, all about improving quality of life for seniors. If you're a senior, know a senior, or plan to be a senior, then this show is for you. It's all about helping you develop your own aging plan so you can age actively and with dignity. Helping Seniors Television from the Helping Seniors Network of information, education, and resources.
Welcome to Helping Seniors TV. I'm Kerry Fink, and on behalf of Joe Steckler, our president and founder, thank you for joining us today. Our mission is to inform, educate, and connect you to resources that are going to make a difference as you develop your own aging plan. What's an aging plan, you say? Well, it's the idea that you need a roadmap as we take additional trips around the sun. So much like those of us in Florida understand a hurricane plan, doesn't mean you want a hurricane. It just means you want a plan. So if they tell you a hurricane's headed your way, you already have some idea of what you do, where you're going to go, and how you're going to resolve those things. The aging plan is much the same idea. It's just thinking about those things that you might run across on the aging journey and to have some ideas and get ahead of the curve instead of having to try to catch up. I can tell you that when we get the calls on the Senior Information Helpline, we had over 5,450 calls last year, that we find that people are oftentimes calling us when they are, in fact, in trouble. And the challenge is, while we often are able to help them navigate successfully whatever challenge that they're working on, transportation, legal, medical, financial, housing, you name it, we probably had a call on it, we find out that when there's more time, there's more options, meaning that when you're trying to make decisions, mom is being let home from the hospital, has to find a good solution on Monday, you don't have as many options as if you can plan a little bit ahead and get ahead on that. What I mean by that is you typically will find more options, more time to really think through what is going to be the best in your particular circumstances. And quite frankly, probably it saves money because when you have more options, you can think clearer and then you can make a better choice. One of the things that we want to get you to start to think about early is the topic of our show today. I want to talk to Carlos Cuesta, who's the owner of Synergy Home Care, and we're going to talk a little bit about getting the right home care at the right time. Carlos, how are you today?
I'm fine, Kerry. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a friend of the Helping Seniors organization. You know, we talk about the fact that it's tough for people. A lot of us end up with aging parents. We end up becoming the caregivers, right? Mom needs a little extra help. Dad's slowing down. They can't quite handle things the way they did. Maybe it's an aunt or uncle, may not, or maybe it's even an older sibling. You know, these things hit our generation as we move through the years. And the challenge is we're having to kind of drop everything we do to try to do our best to assist them to the best we can. And a lot of times we feel like a juggler. We were talking before the camera was rolling about the sandwich generation. You know, you might still be raising kids and trying to deal with mom and dad at the same time. I guess you see this all the time, Carlos.
Yeah, as we see that more and more, a lot of families living together, like you had mentioned, the sandwich generation. So there's a lot of emotions that go into it, and sometimes there's more stress. You know, get the parents taking care of their mom and dad, and then taking care of the kids, as you mentioned. And there's a lot of things going on with their jobs, and their children, right? So it can become stressful. It can hurt relationships, and we're seeing more and more, especially with the economy, where many families are trying to consolidate their expenses.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out, hey, how can we do this better? But then you have some challenges along with that, and that's where we step in.
Yeah, isn't it an interesting thing that one of the things that has become quite evident to us, Helping Seniors now closing in on 15 years of service in our community, and one of the things that we've learned along the way is that a lot of times this sandwich generation thing also hits at the most important point of your career, right? Because you're probably in an advanced position with the work that you do, and a lot of people under you are counting on you to be able to do that work. And now you've got a crisis with mom or dad, and the kids still have to get to school. You still got to take care of all your work responsibility. Really becomes a lot on those people that are trying to do their best to be the caregivers. And you know, there's something else, Carlos. Not only are they really a bit too busy and stretched too thin, but they don't really have the experience either, right? I mean, you know, we want to do the right thing, but we don't always know the right things to do.
Oh, it's true. A lot of families, they do want to do the right thing, but they're not trained to do the right thing.
Right.
Right? And there's only a certain amount of hours in a day.
Yeah.
So they're struggling with their careers, as you mentioned. They got their mother and father, and then they have their children at sporting events,
Yeah.
or maybe after school events, or they're playing in a musical instrument, and the parents want to share time with them as well. So it can become very complex. It can be very stressful, emotional, and what do you do? And that's what we try to educate our families. How can we help, even if it's only a certain days of the week, certain hours of the week, where our caregiver can come in and take that stress off and just help around. It's a way of doing things a little better, a little smarter. For example, when you're on a plane, when they drop those masks, they always ask you put your mask on first so you can help other people. And that's what a lot of families are grateful for.
I was just going to use that exact same analogy because I was thinking about it. They always tell you that in the safety briefing. You've got to look after yourself if you're going to help the people around you. And I've seen this happen so often in caregiving. If you're so busy and so invested in being the caregiver, if you run yourself into the ground, you're not going to be able to do the thing that you hope to do, which is help that person. And you surely haven't done yourself any favors either. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important that we talk about home care. And I guess one of the challenges is if you're outside the system and you've never been exposed to it, you don't know what it is or how to make it work for you the right way. If you sat down with a family and you can see the stress probably on their face, they're like, wow, mom, I've got this problem with mom, but I got the kids and I have only got 10 minutes to talk to you about this because then I got to run over here and do that. As you talk to families, how do you explain how home care can make a difference for them?
Well, what we do when we first receive their phone call, I ask a lot of questions, try to educate them, and then we set a time to go to their home to conduct what we call a consulting or home assessment, where we create a care plan that's specifically designed for them. What are the duties where do they need the most help?
Right.
What types of duties during the day that help their parent or their loved one? Doesn't have to be a parent. It could be anyone. Maybe someone just had surgery, or we can also help with childcare. But with the seniors, what help do they need the most? Is it having companionship during the day? Is it taking their mom or dad for a walk, taking them to doctor's appointments, or watching TV or playing memory games, or helping them shower, bathe, that sort of thing, meal prep? And those little things just gives the family peace of mind.
Yeah.
Knowing that they don't have to worry while they're at work what's happening at home.
That is a big part of it, is the peace of mind, but it's also the fact that you have somebody who is qualified for doing the work that they do. When do you find the right time for a family to call you guys in to just start having these conversations?
Well, as you had said, we're the owners. Anna and myself are the owners. We're very dedicated, 24/7.
Yeah.
And I've met families that's during the week, after hours, Saturday, Sunday, depending on their need and how quickly they need the help. So we really try to make ourselves available.
Yeah.
To get in there as soon as possible. Because the key is once you can put the care plan together, then you want to match up with a right caregiver, someone that's going to fit in with their loved one, who's going to so during the day they get along, they have a good relationship, and it's a good match. And what's really nice about that is that now you have the consistency of that service versus having a turnover.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
That actually brings up a question, because we've talked about this a lot. When you want to get help that you might be thinking about, you also want to get that help the right way. Here's what I mean by that. There's a great advantage we have these days called the internet. And so oftentimes we think we're going to search something out, figure out our own little solution. I've seen it happen, for example, when people are trying to do their own legal work. I've seen it happen when people are trying to do their own medical research and things like that. I'm not saying going on the internet to learn some things isn't a bad thing. But one of the challenges that happens is you never can be sure what's on the other end of that internet line. For example, and I'm just going to pick on lawyers for a minute. If you ever ask a legal question, you'll come back with all these responses and you'll find out there's two problems pretty much right away. One, a lot of these answers are coming from other states, and the state law for whatever we're talking about could be completely different. Then the second part is you'll start to look at the date stamps on when these things were posted. And if you see something like 2017, that was before COVID, maybe the laws have changed and things like that. And I was thinking that really applies when we're talking about home care too, right? Because we talk so much in the helping seniors world that it has to be 100% local. As a charity, we're 100% local to Brevard County because the resources that you need to access are 100% local. So you might see an ad on TV and it says call 1-800, we can help you at home kind of thing. But you're going to call a call center someplace in, I don't know, Kansas City or something. I'm not picking on Kansas City. I'm just saying, but they're not here in Florida. They don't live where we are. They don't know what we know about Florida. So one of the things we always plead with families is talk to somebody local. Carlos, you're local. So when somebody calls you, they're not talking to a call center. They're talking to the owner of the company.
Exactly. Yeah. We are always available any time of day, night, or weekend. And our caregivers, they're all certified through the state of Florida, or home health aides also certified or licensed. So everybody's local. And then when we make the matchup, we make sure that our caregivers don't live too far away from our client families. We want to make sure they're local to that family member so they're not driving across the states. And then that can create some challenges or problems. So, yeah, I mean, being local, which is very nice. I know the culture. We know the people. They can get to know me. I get to know them. For example, today I was with one family. You know, we started taking care of their spouse a couple of weeks ago, and I drop in. How are things going? What can we do better? Any suggestions? That sort of thing. So we're always in touch with our families.
See, it's that personal touch. We've talked about this in so many areas. And let me bring this point up too. I pick on a lot of times we're associated with a number of excellent elder law attorneys. And I remember one of them in particular said to me, Kerry, you know, when people come to our office, this is maybe the first time or the second time in their life that they're dealing with this particular legal thing. And it's pretty unusual for them. They say, for us, this is 20 or 30 days a week going, and we've been doing this for 20 years. So there's not much that they haven't had to figure out how to resolve. But I was thinking the same goes for what you do in the home care business. When we are like trying to caregive for our parents or our loved ones, we're kind of having to have on-the-job training, trying to figure out what we're trying to do, or how much does mom need, or how do we work this thing? This is where your experience comes in because you are dealing with families all the time, and you can sort of see what's happening and make the right, I guess, recommendation for what should be happening.
Right, yeah. Just so everyone understands, Florida is a very highly regulated state when it comes to our industry, which is good for the consumer,
Right.
and good for the family. Not every state is. Florida is. It's a good thing. So we have to be trained specifically. Before we could open our doors, we had to be licensed, and we went through 12 months of training.
Wow.
And then we continued our training, so we're up with the laws, the regulations, what the state of Florida requires, and that's how and in our experience, of course. So that's how we educate our families. Because it's important for us to be up to date on all the important ins and outs, let's say, so we can provide the right service legally, and we can educate our families. And it's amazing. Most people do not know what we do until they call, and until we educate them, they have no clue. And so when we have that phone call, or we conduct that 1 hour, 2 hour home assessment with them, and then I actually walk on the caregivers. For example, last night, I walked on a caregiver at 11 o'clock at night.
Wow.
p.m. at nighttime. Very personalized service. But the caregiver and the client appreciated that extra effort to make sure everything went smoothly.
Yeah. So. You know, I want to circle back and talk more about that. I wanted to put in one other point because something you talked about triggered something when you were talking about how Florida is regulated and how that actually, I believe in many cases, it's a good thing because I have heard one of the areas in helping seniors world is we hear so much about senior scams and things like that. And I always shudder to hear the story of somebody who plucked a name off of a bulletin board, maybe at the local grocery store or something like that. And then they had somebody come into their home who may or may not be licensed, who said they had some experience, and then there's a problem down the road. And that puts that person that called them in a very difficult place because there's not really any accountability or any way to really resolve it. One of the things I want to talk for a minute, or have you talk for a minute, about the dangers of plucking, an unlicensed, unregistered person, even if they might be well-meaning.
Yeah, that's very important. I try to educate all my clients because sometimes they think they can save $1 here or there. But the thing is, you're putting someone in your home that you don't know them very well. You think you may know them, but do you know them? Yeah. and have they had a background check done? With our caregivers, they all have the background checks done nationally, and then also their fingerprints done through the state of Florida. So that's very key. The other thing that a lot of people forget, if that caregiver were to fall or get hurt in your property, you could be liable for that.
Wow.
Or they call out sick or they're going on vacation. Now you don't have a backup.
Yeah.
What happens then? And one thing that we're starting to see a lot, if you have a caregiver for a certain amount of time in your home and you're paying them directly, but one day you don't need them, and that caregiver actually files for unemployment, you could be responsible for those payroll taxes since you're the employer.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of things. That's why we say don't try this on your own, because there's all these things in we have one of our colleagues who likes to say, how can you know what you don't know? And that's why when we live in a community that has so many great resources, it makes all the sense in the world to call somebody who really does know, and this ain't their first rodeo. That's a point. So Carlos, back to the point, like when you work to match your caregiver with a particular need in a particular situation, that's a function of your experience of having done this for years. How, as you look at those situations and you go in and you put that care plan together, talk about how your experience reflects on what the appropriate level is. And I assume you're always trying to be careful to minimize the needed expense for the family, but make sure that they're getting the caregiving that they actually do need.
Right. Well, first of all, prior to Center J Home Care, I spent 38 years in human resources.
Right.
So I'm very experienced on hiring process, qualifying candidates, and how to place them, who to hire, who not to hire. So from that care plan that we were just discussing is when we go in there, we're going to look at the environment, we're going to meet the family, the personalities, what the care plans is, and then we're going to match up the caregiver. For example, we may ask additional questions. What does your loved one enjoy doing during the day? So we're going to find someone who can communicate in those areas or enjoy doing the things that your loved one does. But we got to make sure, first of all, before we place them, that we've done the background checks, the fingerprints, all that's been done. We check the references. We look at their job stability. We really look at what's very key is this caregiver or candidate to be a caregiver, are they looking for a JOB job or do they really enjoy what they're doing? Do they really care? And how do we identify that is how, when we do ask them questions, do they make good eye contact? Do they smile? We put them through a behavior interview, asking them about certain situations, how do they handle them in the past, and where they've been successful and why. And that's what we're looking for. We don't just pick somebody and just put them at your home. And, my saying to every one of my clients is, if I would not put that caregiver in my home with my mom or dad, I'm certainly not going to put them in your home with your mom or dad.
That's so rich what you're talking about. I wanted to really hone in for a minute when you were talking about your background in HR, because here again, those are the nuances. People, it might look simple. I'm just going to hire this person. They're going to come and help mom or dad for an hour or two. But with your background of understanding all the nuances of HR, the regulation side of it, the personality fit side of it, it really puts you in a great position to really come up with a solution that's going to make the most sense for that family. A lot of times we were talking about this, I asked you the question, said, who initiates the call? Like when you get a call, say, I think we got to get some help here. I was asking you, is it the senior themselves? Is it a loved one, like the spouse of a senior? Is it the sandwich generation, the kids who are concerned that mom or dad can't do this? Is it a neighbor who's like, I'm not sure about the lady next door? Talk about who calls you and how that conversation begins.
It's a mix, but most of the time it's the child or the mom or the father that they call in. They may live nearby or they may live in a different state, and they're concerned for their mother or father, especially if they live alone.
Right.
Can you help me? I'm going to be flying down there. Can we get together? I've gotten together with some families on a Sunday afternoon.
Sure.
Where we go in it because they're going to fly back the next day, Monday, because they have a job. So we'll go in and we'll spend the time together. And normally it's the mother, the child of that parent.
Yeah.
Very concerned. They're concerned about, are they eating correctly?
Yeah.
Could they fall? What happens if they fall? Are they by themselves?
Wow.
Security. There's a lot of security. Can they bathe, dress themselves? Can they get out of bed or get into bed? Do they need help in those areas, getting in and out of bed?
Wow.
So there's a lot that goes into it. It's a very high level of responsibility and accountability for our caregivers.
Yeah, and I was going to say, on the other side, though, as you talk about it, there's so many like definitional nuances in here. that it really becomes important for that family to be able to trust your wisdom about this is the right situation, where we're at this point in time. Because, we've talked about this so many times. There's a sort of a suddenly thing. Somebody has a fall, somebody has something happen, and all of a sudden now everybody's scrambling to kind of react to that. And I've heard it said many times that oftentimes you, meaning the home care folks, are the ones that are really the eyes and ears and hands and feet that are keeping the rest of the family up to speed on what's going on with mom or dad. So especially when the kids are like not in the location or not able to get by the way they would want to.
Yeah, that's key. And our caregivers go in, and like you said, they're the eyes and the ears, but they also write notes.
Yeah.
So they have a record of what's happening each and every time they go in there.
Yeah.
So we can share that with the family.
Yeah.
But again, it gives peace of mind, especially if your mom, your dad, they're maybe a little older. Maybe they're having a hard time getting around. Maybe you don't want them falling in the shower.
Yeah.
And a lot of our seniors, they have a lot of pride.
Yeah.
They're very proud, very proud people, but they need that help.
So that's another question. Suppose it's an adult child is calling and they'll say, Carlos, I think mom needs help, or I think dad needs some help, but they're not hearing it from me. I guess you get to come in and kind of broker out some of those situations sometimes.
I go into situations, Kerry, that there's 5 family members and then the client, and they're all giving their own opinions at one time, going back and forth, and they're not agreeing. So I say, hey, guys, let's time out. Let's 1 or 2, and let's talk this through, but let's work together and put a plan together. And then what I tell that senior, sometimes they do have a lot of pride. So I'm like, it's not for you. It's really for your daughter or for your son. To give them the peace of mind. And then they'll those kind of smile and say, okay,
Yeah.
I buy into it.
It's a big conversation. And I guess a lot of times, I remember hearing this from Nancy Deerdorf, who has been our operations director. And she always talked about being a caregiver in her family for her father. And she said, she got to a point where her dad was having kind of like a chronic illness over time. And she shared that there was a point that she felt like, even though her own personal background was that of a registered nurse, so this is somebody who really does know what she's doing about caregiving, but she said there was a point where she felt like, I've got to call in some help. And she said, you know what I realized? She goes, with all the seriousness of the situation, I could relax because now I could go back to being the daughter and being concerned for my father, not having to worry about, is this taken care of? Is this taken care of? You must see that a lot when you actually get somebody into that care system and then they get to have like a big, doesn't mean the problem went away, but they get a big, like a new picture of everything that's going on.
Yeah, it's a nice feeling when the family says, thank you for helping us. Yeah. And sometimes the service may stop because they may go away or there's no birds. And then when they return, they call us again. Because they trusted us the first time. We did a good job. And they call us again. And it's a great feeling. It's the reason we do this business every day.
Yeah. And I'm sure this is a business like you said, even when you're talking to people who might potentially come to work for you, you're going to make sure that they're in it for the reason of caregiving, not, like you said, a job. When somebody wants to call you, get in touch, how do they reach you? What's the place to get this whole process started to learn more?
Yeah, I give everybody one phone number because even though it's the office number, after 3 rings, if I don't pick up, it rolls right into my cell phone.
Okay.
So it's a real simple way, 321-340-3828. Again, 321-340-3828. Extension for me, 101.
Yeah, Carlos Cuesta with Synergy Home Care. So I want to ask the question, is there a right time that we should give you a call? Have you ever heard of it? I've heard them talk about a problem. They call it a creeping problem. The problem is if you knew it was going to get this deep and this big, you would have come up with a solution way back. But it started out fairly simple, and it's just getting more complicated as time goes on. Do you find a lot of the problems that you're called into are those they didn't know the job was going to be quite that big as they were starting to try to caregive?
Yeah, you always want to plan ahead.
Yeah.
You don't want to wait till the last minute.
Yeah.
And then we want to sit down and say, okay, what do we need? And let's put that plan ahead of time.
Yeah.
So you can make that right match and provide the right service. That's key. But once you see mom or dad or a loved one where they're having a more difficult time staying alone, or they can't do daily activities
Yeah.
as they were in the past, or they can't drive, that's when it's time to say, let me look into this. And that's what I do. When families call me, I like to educate them, whether they work with us or not. I may refer them to a different partner. We have different partners that I may refer them to. But our intent is, how do we provide the best service for them at that time and educate them so they can make the best decisions for their family.
Yeah. I keep coming back to this thing. You got to talk to somebody who's local. You can't, I suppose you can. You could do an internet search. I assume you can do call an 800 number you saw on TV, but it really makes all the difference if you're talking with somebody local who can come in and really has the experience to look at the situation, help you kind of decide what the best ramifications and steps are, given all the parts of it. It really takes that experience to give that guiding recommendation. Carlos, let's have your phone number and contact information one more time.
Phone number is 321-340-3828. 321-340-3828. And one thing real quick, we also help veterans qualify for their VA health so they can get this service at home, or a surviving spouse or couple with aid and attendance where we can help with the funding.
Carlos Cuesta, that's a call that somebody should make today. But we're talking about this, getting the right care at home and understanding the great care that's available to you locally here in Brevard County. That's about the time we have for today's show. I want to thank you, Carlos, for joining us. On behalf of Joe Steckler, our president and founder, the entire Helping Seniors team, I want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Helping Seniors TV. We will see you again real soon.
I'm Joe Steckler. Thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses, and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniors.brevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.